I want to actually ask early on in the interview so we can set the ground rules and then we'll move on and talk about other topics as well later. Essentially, on that aspect, the idea of like, you see a woman in esports, like women in esports, like what are their roles? I actually want to ask you just straight up at the beginning of the interview, do you think it should be a topic when someone talks to someone like you? Do you take offense to it? Is it crowbarred in too much? What's your take on that angle? Like, would you like there to be an interview that doesn't ever mention it?
Yeah, see, I go back and forth on that one for quite some years, actually. I just straight up said when someone wanted to do the interview, if you ask anything about me being a woman in the industry, like, just I'll literally walk out of the interview because I can't answer it anymore. It's just every single time the same question. I'm always going to have the same answers. Like, I don't know what me talking about it is not really going to change it. But my stance on that has kind of changed because I do think that I guess you have to talk about it. Like, you can't not address it because it doesn't go away if you don't address it either. I do think, however, now luckily it's not the same conversation anymore like back then, you know? Like back then it was completely different. Now, even in my own work, like I'm surrounded by kick-ass women, like front of the camera, behind the camera. Like we have women in almost every single position there is in an esports broadcast. So I don't think it's quite the same conversation anymore. I think you can have a conversation about how women are still being perceived, about what some of the reactions are, and how double standards are still very much a thing. And sexism is absolutely still quite as rampant as it was back then. But it's not about, oh, women, there is no women. Like that's not a thing anymore. There are definitely a lot of women, much more than some of the people watching esports might actually be aware of.
Oh, there's loads, especially the joke is the industry part of it. They're incredibly represented. Yeah, maybe among players, not as many, of course. Yeah, there's people who are just casuals. Who knows what the divide is? But I agree, the industry is women are ubiquitous, of course. It's just part of the esports industry. Because what I want to ask was this: since I know you will have been asked about these topics a million times, I think I have my own perspective on these questions. Also, one thing I would like to ask initially, I sort of set it up there. Goes, since you are an actual proper OG in esports, you're not just someone who even, like nowadays, even people who've been around for 5 years call themselves a veteran. Like you actually were there 17 years ago. As I say, you must have a really different perspective on like the esports space, men in the esports space, what is a gamer and stuff, right? So do you think you have a different perspective than people who are joining the industry now, man or woman?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people who are joining now, they take everything for granted. Like we kind of, I feel like we all did the grunt work. Like back in the days, I built the stage I hosted on, you know, I casted on. Like literally, I set down booths. I was doing the lighting on the rigs. I was climbing up, doing banners. I was like hammering down walls. There's pictures of me like literally building booths.
It used to be a famous thing, especially with the ESL I know you worked with. At the end, everyone took the scaffolding down. And stuff like, everyone.
Everyone had to help because we didn't have the budget to like bring in extra crew for that. So we would spend 2 weeks prior to the event building the event. So by the time the event came around, I looked like I was bruised and covered in scrapes because I just like did like all that manual labor. And back in the days, like I wouldn't have a hotel room. We would sleep like in weird kind of like hostels, like all together, cramped in rooms. Like I shared rooms with like people I don't even know, male and female. Like that was what it was. And I mean, obviously that was okay with me because like that was my passion. I was like, that's what you got to do. These days people get upset that they don't have 2 like queen size beds in their hotel rooms. I'm like, what the heck? I still marvel at it. I still walk into a hotel room and feel like, oh my God, I have my own room. Like that's incredible. So I think there's a lot more appreciation for where we're at right now, which you can tell when you're at an event, like the quote unquote younger talent. They get more impatient about stuff when things don't go right. Like they have more difficulties with technical issues. They got more frazzled much more quicker because they didn't get trialed by fire like the OG crew where we had to go through everything, do everything ourselves. Like I mean, having a production and everything that wasn't a big thing. Like we had G Arena, like we did it our own. Like having observers as a mega luxury right now. So. Yeah, I think from that perspective, I am much more appreciative and in awe of where esports is right now because I have that direct comparison to what it was back then.
As you said earlier, obviously you got all the old classics, like so you see you're a gamer, then name like all 17 levels of whatever, yeah, as you say, like the classic one, right? But also, as you say, when you joined the industry as well, there weren't many women in it, so I'm sure there were loads of people where initially they showed interest, but it turns out it was just for one very reductive reason, or they thought they'd sleep with you, or even just they want some female attention, who knows what reason. But what I would want to ask is this: when do you think the industry side, though, sort of ticked over and you felt accepted? Because I would say in the modern day, to me, like the ignorant comments generally, it's just like, it's like you'd imagine the 15-year-old kid who's just joined esports, he just plays the game, or what. It's usually among the industry people, like we all know each other, we've all been around years now. I feel like surely people feel accepted in the industry, right?
I think for me, it's that the more women joined, which were, this is going to sound, it's actually going to sound kind of fucked up, to be honest, what I'm about to say now. It might offend some people, but the more, I want to put that in quotation marks, the more illegitimate women joined, the more the legitimate women were appreciated, because they started hiring so many women who had no idea about gaming. They just added random hosts, which is great. Like, I'm sure they're great at just hosting, but they weren't aware of the material. They weren't aware of the game, of the community and all those things. So I think that direct comparison, to listen to those kind of females joining the scene, if you then compare it to the OG females who are in the scene, who really, really understand the game, they play them, they live them, they're just as much a fan as anyone else in gaming. I think that really helped, because it made people really appreciate that, they actually know what they're talking about. That said, though, when I started off, no matter how good I was still being questioned. They were still like, oh, she doesn't know what she talked about. I was high ranked in StarCraft 2 when I casted it, yet people would still act like I basically have no idea what the game is all about, which is really frustrating, because there's no winning those people over. They just made up their mind. But then again, in direct comparison to people who actually don't know what they're talking about, that made me look more legit. So that did help, actually, which is awful, but yeah, I guess. I
see the angle, what you mean there, though. And obviously when you say illegitimate, you just mean in the sense that they weren't authentic gamers. They were just there because it was a gig, or their agent got them out or something. Yeah, of course.
Illegitimate is probably the wrong word.
No, I knew what you meant.
I don't know.
It's all good. Because another thing along these lines is, one thing that people never get asked about who are women, is I'd be really interested in all this as well, is it's not as simple as everyone who gives their opinion publicly is always doing it totally of their own accord. I've known a lot of women in the industry who felt pressured actually to comment on every big political and social topic, or maybe someone says something and then you have the person nudging you like, well, you've got to say something about that. Do you ever feel like people want you to be like a billboard for women in esports or anything?
All the time. It's very exhausting, actually, because a lot of time they think that you only care and you only are doing something when you're tweeting about it or whatever. They don't understand that those tweets, that kind of stuff, that I'm preaching to the choir. My followers know what I'm all about. Of course they're gonna agree, except from the few trolls who follow me just to disagree with stuff. We all have some of those, but it is about what you're doing behind the scenes, how you elevate other females or any other gender who's trying to break into, or a diverse person who's trying to break into the industry. There is a lot which goes on behind the scenes which people don't see, and I don't need to make it public that I'm working my ass off to be inclusive and help people to get a foot into the door. I because I don't do it for the public approval. I do it because I believe in the cause, and I want to give people a chance. I want to help people. I don't need to tweet about it because I don't care what people see or what they don't see. But yeah, they do use that as you didn't speak out about it, therefore you don't care. That's not how it works, unfortunately, or fortunately. Yeah.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.